Hello and welcome to the Backseat Designers. I'm Trolls, aka the Space Quest Historian. And no, that's not a flesh-colored cucumber in my pants. I really am that happy to see you. With me, as always, are my two delightful co-hosts. The man who wishes he could reanimate Margaret Thatcher just so he can kill her all over again, Mr. Dr. Gareth Millward.
That's not entirely true. I would interview her first.
just to see what her deal is. Like if she's really... And then... Would you sword to the face? Would you gunshot? No, I'm just let's not get into that. Because we have another person in the house, a man who wishes he could reanimate Peter Cushing just so he can plant a big fat wet kiss on his forehead, Mr. Frederick Olsen.
I'm not saying I would stop it short at the forehead, but hello.
Just work your way down.
I like Peter Cushing a lot. He was a phenomenal actor who I could talk about for hours, but we're not going to do that here.
No, we have a topic this time.
The topic.
But first of all, how you guys been doing? It's been a couple of weeks since we did our introductory rambly episode. What you guys been up to? That much, huh?
I think you're the only one who's been up to anything of note compared to our daily lives.
Have I really? Mm-hmm. I moved house. That was it. My life just sort of hit pause for a couple of weeks, and now I'm in a new room.
Was that like brick by brick, or...
Yes, we actually built it from scratch in a couple of weeks. Actually, one of the dudes who helped us move is like this amateur carpenter kind of thing, bricklayer. He basically just built his family a house out in like the woods somewhere. It just scrounging up materials that they get for free. And we went out there one day. We were used to them living in like this small cottage kind of thing. We went out there one day, and he's like built an attachment to the house the size of the original cottage. Just glued it onto the other side. Like, oh, how long did that take? 2 or 3 weeks.
Is this man's name Varg?
No, he's Welsh actually. So I don't know if Gareth has some perspective he'd like to throw in on this one.
Well, my name is Welsh, but I have no opinions on the Welsh that anybody with this accent really should vocalise.
Are we pronouncing your name correctly then?
Is it Gareth?
No, it's Gareth.
Oh, Gareth.
In a Welsh accent, kind of Welsh accent. There was a puppet show on the Welsh TV channel, and this monkey is called Gareth. I'll have to dig out a picture of it. It's quite entertaining. I've no idea what's going on because it's all in Welsh, but he's called Gareth. So
it's so nice when you get the story of this is why we chose the name for you, dear son. It was a monkey on television.
I think the topic of this podcast is just shifted entirely. We're not going to cover what we planned. We're just going to talk about the monkey called Gareth.
Apparently so. Yeah, to be fair, there's only been one Dane that I've met so far that hasn't been able to pronounce my name, and he was a little bit worse for wear, and he didn't speak English. So,
well, that'll do it. Yeah,
it's not too bad.
Well, actually, this segues nicely into our topic because you could argue that the Gareth with us is a remaster or a remake, as it were, of the Welsh TV monkey Gareth.
Do you know what? I think we've just had the worst segue of the entire history of the show.
I haven't done this for a few years, give or take. Give me a chance.
Okay, I will give you a chance because we had a bit of I wouldn't say an argument. It was more of a back and forth.
You told me to eat your shit.
That did culminate in me telling you to eat shit, yes. But that was mainly because I was eating dinner at the time and I couldn't be fucked to answer in a proper way.
Were you eating shit?
No, chicken burger. But
it's the same, right?
My son was in a bit of a mood at the time, so he did complain that it tasted like shit.
Lovely.
But he ate it, so it was tasty shit.
Dan Lauderberger.
Leckert. God damn. We should I don't know if anyone heard the previous episode all the way to the end, but...
Actually, we should probably extend our thanks because according to the YouTube stats, a couple of 100 people listened to that to the end. And knowing the way you handle maths, that equals a couple of 100,000 people listening to the end. So I just want to thank each and every person individually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, expect a Kickstarter by the end of the month.
Don't get a big head.
All right, so I'm the only one who's actually done anything with my life for the past 2 weeks. So none of you gents want to interject on that one. I'll just assume you've been sitting still staring at a wall for a fortnight.
Pretty much, it has to be said.
Being a father of 2, I sometimes wish that was what my life revolved around, but sadly, no. It's been a little more menial and work-life balancey.
That's your excuse for everything, isn't it? I have active semen. Anyway,
I don't anymore.
Well, I never did, so I win. But still, the topic of
good lord, we're just going to let that.
Wait a minute.
We're just going to have to sit in that, aren't we?
Yeah, everyone in here is officially sterile.
Are we? I don't know. I just don't think Gareth ever has sex. Fuck it.
That does help. Actually, it is the best contraception.
Don't you remember he told us he'd had a vasectomy? And he made a big number out of not carrying semen through customs.
I thought he was just born that way. I thought all English people.
It was an empty cup. Well, I got it. I got the procedure done before it was time to get it tested, because then I needed to emigrate. So I had to find a way of getting that back to the UK.
That's also how you got COVID.
Let's move on, shall we?
COVID through the urinary tract. I was just going to say, did you get it at the airport? Was this like a botched full body cavity search, or was she surprisingly gentle?
No, thankfully.
Some people get a temporary passport at the airport. Some people get a vasectomy.
God, that one stung both of us.
It's a 50-50 chance.
Well, look, Denmark is so racist, it's giving vasectomies at the border post because it just doesn't want any foreign children. So.
Okay, we should definitely move on. There may be a little bit of judicious editing, so if you hear any voices overlapping or suddenly jumping around,
no, I'm kidding.
That's just us being terrible.
Or libeling the foreign ministry, yeah.
I just asked if he wanted to stab or shoot Margaret Thatcher. I don't think we can do any worse than that.
Yeah, she's already dead, so
we had a topic.
Damage is limited.
There was a topic discussed. We're now almost 8 minutes into the episode. Let's finally get around to the topic, shall we? Remasters and remakes of games. And I had a whole list of, just games we could talk about. Was this a good remaster, or was this a good remake? Was this a good demake, and all that sort of stuff? And then, as we sort of alluded to earlier, over dinner time, we got into this little discussion of, well, what's a remake and a rematch? What's the difference? What's the actual definition of these two? So I think if we could just quickly recap how Frederick is wrong about this, and I'll jump in after that and correct everyone.
Come at me, bro.
No, you start, sir.
Well, I mean, it's hard for me because I'm familiar with remaster as the musical term first and foremost, and what you basically do with a musical remaster is you take everything that has been mixed, like the guitar and the drums and blah, 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 bass guitar is all, on 2 channels, 1 per speaker. That goes into like an EQ, a compressor, whatever, audio, black magic, biggity boo, and it comes out in something that sounds the same way across your big ass 70s stereo and your shitty Bluetooth cans, whatever. So not really a fresh coat of paint, more like washing the window, right?
Yeah, and the same kind of idea applies to films, where you go back to the original footage and clean up the audio, maybe sharpen the picture, and yeah, it's essentially the same thing, but it looks better on a digital TV or on the big screen better than it did when it first came out. On that point, I went to go and see the remaster of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre last week, so
cool.
That had been remastered and was definitely a lot cleaner and easier to see some of the darker shots in the woods than it had been before.
The blood was just sparkling red.
Whereas if you went to see a remake, you might have seen, I don't know, the shittiest film remake of all time, I guess, is Gus Van Sant watching Hitchcock's Psycho and deciding, I can do better than that. And somehow hopefully realizing that he could not, in fact, do better than that. So that's where you basically rebuild the whole thing from the ground up, right? You know, in an adventure game, the story would be the same, but everything is kind of redone. I guess not necessarily close to the original product.
Well, this is where things started falling apart. I mean, this sounds like in the interim between me chowing down a chicken burger and us,
which tastes like shit.
Which did not taste like shit. My kid's just an asshole. We have apparently sort of met in some sort of agreement, whereas there was actually almost an argument erupting a few hours ago. See, my contention was that, as we both pointed out in our own ways, the terms remaster and remake get conflated occasionally. For my example was the Silent Hill remasters that have come out are not actually remasters; they're remakes, but they get branded as remasters. There's probably going to be a Silent Hill fan in the comments going, "Well, actually," but that's how I remember it, at least. They're remakes. None of the original assets from the original games are in these new versions. They've just, they've rebuilt the games essentially. So that's where the term remaster and remakes kind of get mixed up.
I sort of get the impression that we're at a golden age of remasters, at least for FPS games. I touched upon some of that in the last episode, but
yeah, you got a restraining order. I know.
Quake 2, Doom 64.
Lost connection to server. Well, it says lost connection to server, attempting to reconnect.
Wo ist der englische Planke?
No, I'm still here, but I've been told to go and put the kettle on, so I've been listening to you while I put the kettle on the other side.
What I was saying before Zencaster decided to emulate fucking Skype is that we seem to be having sort of a golden age for remasters presently. I touched upon it in the last episode, but FPS games like Doom 64, Doom 1 and 2, Quake 1 and 2 have all seen some pretty spectacular remasters. Now, I don't know how many years it was ago, but if you go to GOG and you play the phenomenal, by the way, game, The 11th Hour by Trilobite, the sequel to The Seventh Guest.
That's the actual full title.
Yeah, you'll get something that has a Night Dive Studios, who are very well renowned for their remasters, by the way, logo slapped in front of it. And that's basically it. That's as far as the remastering goes. Well, the options menu is dumbed down, but the same bugs are still there. The same obtuse puzzles are still there. The mismatch in volume between the voicing and the music, that's still there. So I think we've moved on from a point where the end game was to get these games on digital storefronts, and sometimes they just did that with the least amount of effort they could possibly conceive to put into it.
I will somewhat defend Night Dive Studios here, because there is no way to remaster the 11th Hour. All the original footage has been lost, and what you get on GOG is the shitty Windows version that Trilobite themselves did back in the 90s. That just completely, butchers the whole experience. But why they would slap a Night Dive logo on the front of it, and do they actually call it a remaster?
I don't think they call it a remaster, but here's the thing: if you slap the logo onto it, you'll have expectations. I remember actually when one of the I don't know if he's a founder, so I gotta choose my words carefully, but one of the main guys behind the Kex engine that Night Dive has become famous for using, one of the first things he did that gave him some notoriety was actually deconstructing Doom 64 and doing a total conversion for a Doom source port, which meant that for the first time you could play Doom 64 on a PC without having to emulate a Nintendo 64 and without having the original ROM in your possession. So it's not as if these guys aren't used to reverse engineering. They'll do that, and I think they could have done something for the 11th hour. At the very least, turn the music down while the angry bald man is yelling in your ear. That would have been a start, but I don't think they were given the resources to do that. Entire speculation on my part. I think the goal was just let's get this piece of shit on Steam and GOG and conveniently forget everything about it.
But that emulation kind of issue, I think, is really important, because there's other changes that can be made to games that, from the end user point of view, maybe they don't change the way the game plays a huge amount, but they do in subtle and not so subtle ways change what the original thing was. This has become much more of an issue for me in my day job, because for those of you who don't know, I'm a historian, and I work at
an actual historian.
An actual historian. I do a podcast with the Space Quest historian, who probably has more reach than I do as a professional historian. And my brother is now
at times we're in.
My brother now probably has a bigger audience as a motor racing historian than I do. But the point is, one of the things that I am interested in is the archived internet, and how you use those kind of websites and the way that they get sort of changed and mediated by the way that they've been held, and it is tricky to work out when it comes to a remastering. Is the remastering being done to make the game more palatable to a modern audience, or is it just the bare minimum required to get the thing to work on a modern computer? And is that something we should be doing, or should we be leaving them as they are and doing all sorts of weird emulation stuff? I'm not entirely sure what the right answer is there.
Oh, that's a very interesting point, actually, because, I mean, on the whole, having a remaster whose purpose it is to allow a game to play on modern system, which was previously outdated and wouldn't work on modern system. Grim Fandango comes to mind. That thing was notoriously hard to get running on modern PCs because it was a Windows 95 or 98 game or whatever, and you had to have a virtual machine to get that thing running. That's genuinely noble attempts to get stuff on, and also they polished up some of the artwork, made it high res. The original ran in 640 by 480. Now it's in full widescreen. They added a point and click interface, which occasionally works, but A for effort. And so that's my idea of a good remaster. The Day of the Tentacle remaster is even better because it lets you switch between updated graphics, old graphics, updated UI, old UI, updated sound effects and speech, old sound effects and speech, like on the fly. You can customize that any way you want. That's like a proper remaster, but it also takes care of that thing you said about letting it run on modern machines, which was, make it more accessible to people who want to play it, but don't know how to set up a virtual machine or run emulators or all that sort of shit. That's one thing. The other is the low effort, low hanging fruit, where it's perfectly possible to run this thing on modern machines. Maybe it's not even that old of a game. I don't particularly know how many people still have their old PS1s and PS2s and still play Silent Hill. I would imagine it's quite a lot of people. So I don't think the new remakes of Silent Hill were had much to do with garnering a new audience. I think Silent Hill has done pretty well in terms of audiences. I think that was more in the interest of, as you say, giving it a new coat of paint and going back and just see, okay, what would happen if we, remade this with all the bells and whistles we have at our disposal today.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Grim Fandango, and then, I'm tempted to jump back to that because I know a little bit more about Grim Fandango than I know Silent Hill. Now, I never actually played it through Grim Fandango, so the details are kind of lost on me, but as far as I remember, one thing they were able to do with the remaster is actually there was a bug in the code towards the end of the game where Manny runs into the big bad. I can't for the life of me remember the name of him, so I'm going to call him Senor Caca. And you talk to him, but he's just sitting there. Now, that's a bug. Originally, he's supposed to do a huge exposition dump that makes the whole story and plot against Manny much clearer. But this thing did not occur in the original game because, I don't know, they hit crunch time and they just baked this bug in, and that's how it went. There are a lot of written and voiced lines that
Darren fucked up.
Never made it into what people would play. So they went back and finished that, and that's kind of a double-edged sword because, okay, Tim Schafer was able to deliver the experience that he wanted to deliver. Not all the story was actually there in the Grim Fandango that people remember from the late 90s, but in doing so, he also tampered with the experience and created something that wasn't there originally.
Well, that's, I would say going back and fixing something that was intended to be in the game but didn't trigger because of a bug. I think we can let that one slide. I think an example of what you are talking about that's a little more egregious is the Gabriel Knight 20th Century Anniversary Edition or whatever the fuck it was, where they not only changed some plot points around, but also added a fucking squirrel and a sliding tile puzzle for some reason. That's a little more on the iffy side, and again, that's not a remaster. That's a remake, but where they go back and diddle with things like fixing stuff that isn't broke, essentially, and just adding more cog blocks. The broken sword re-thingamajig. What was it? The director's cut is what they called it, which sort of toes the line between a remaster and a remake, I guess, because they added some stuff at the beginning, which was an entirely new chapter. So that's all new stuff. And I remember playing it on the Nintendo Wii, which was a big mistake because all the added stupid puzzles that they did were with like motion controls. You had to sit there and wave the fucking Wiimote at the screen. I actually gave up halfway through the game because there was some shit that I couldn't pass because of the fucking motion controls. So that sort of teeters between a remaster and a remake. That sort of meddling.
Yeah, but that kind of meddling, I think that this is one of the things that has always interested me about computer games, and one of the things, of course, that we are talking about as backseat designers is you can't really do that with a movie, right? You can't 20 years later go and re-record one of the scenes and seamlessly integrate it into the plot, right? But whereas with I mean, okay, you might be able to say that the sliding puzzle did not seamlessly go into the Gabriel Knight re-edition, but you can introduce new elements, you can expand things, you can take things away. I mean, obviously, there's always been sort of director's cuts where stuff that was left on the cutting room floor has been reintroduced to the film, or you cut it in a different way to slightly change the tone or the form of the story. Yeah. I guess it's technically possible if you've got a classic album to maybe re-record one of the parts with a new musician or something and try and blend it in if necessary.
Yeah.
But there is something that's possible with computer games, which is both very cool, but also a little bit worrying because it becomes then difficult to think about. Okay, so what is the not necessarily the definitive edition, but what is the game, and what is this stuff that's been sort of this kind of Frankenstein monster thing that comes afterwards, and I feel like it's on some kind of spectrum, and I'm not entirely sure where the line is between adding something that was always meant to be there, or making sure a UI actually works, and just adding new material and pretending that everything's fine.
Yeah, well, I think Fred's example about fixing the Grim Fandango bug of something that was meant to be there and it's just a technical error that it didn't show up. That one gets a free pass for me. But I mean, when you were saying that, I kept thinking George Lucas, because this man will just not leave the fucking Star Wars movies alone, and he keeps saying, "No, this is the definitive version. No, this is this is what I had in mind," and he just keeps on and on. Can we think of any like game franchises where they just keep rolling the same shit out and they either tweak some stuff or they make changes where it's just universally panned by everyone, and they go and keep going. fucking the original was better. Come on.
It's difficult because I think the kind of games that we're into that are based on narrative and are based on plot and story, it becomes much more difficult to do that kind of thing because you're not necessarily reusing assets. I mean, it's this whole thing, right? That one of the reasons why we moved away from, or why the industry moved away from adventure games is because a first-person shooter is far, far cheaper to produce, and you can make it longer and reuse the assets and all of that kind of stuff. So I've absolutely no doubt that there are first-person shooters where there's a new thing that comes out every few years and is basically variations on a theme. But I think you can get away with it more because there are a lot more themes that you can put onto the same game, right? Whereas if you can't really remake some of those classic adventure games, and it'll either have to be like completely from scratch, but at which point you are doing something new, or really, really badly hacked together.
Yeah,
and I'm not entirely sure how that would work. I mean, there are lots of complaints always about the sort of the Electronic Arts various franchises, especially the sports franchises. Like, there's always this sort of this criticism that they've just added one new feature and pretended it's a new game and broken what didn't work in the previous one.
Yeah.
And I think there are some similar criticisms about some of their first-person shooters, but I don't really pay much attention to that. Maybe the two of you have got some better examples.
I mean, I will say this, it's not really the same thing, but did we really need two different remakes of Leisure Suit Larry 1? Is there really enough story to do that?
Well, and the game itself is a remake, right?
Oh, yeah.
The game, yeah. So actually, three different... Did we ever need three different remakes of soft porn adventure?
Well, I do think we needed the first remake. And at least Suit Larry's a classic. I can't say the same for soft porn.
We did need the first one.
Well, we sort of did in the way that it inspired Al Lowe to actually go, dude, this game is weak. What can I do to spice this up? Oh, it's as dead as disco. I'll make the lead character a disco kind of guy. All the while, when you're saying, thinking of examples, like saying rolling out a new version of an FPS, I keep thinking of how the fan community have kept stuff like Doom and Quake alive, especially Doom. Like, you could run Doom with an RTX now, and it's got all the ray tracing shit and colored lighting and all that sort of stuff. It looks like an entirely new game, and it's fantastic what the fan community has done with Doom. And like you said, you can't really reuse well, you can technically with a story-driven adventure game, but there's only so much you can do where the narrative is the focal point without completely messing the whole fucking thing up. So I was thinking, no, wait a minute. Sorry.
Oh no, he's off again.
No, it's my turn to talk.
No, I just wanted to bring up
still folk.
The I'll just
Bettina.
I'll throw this one out there and I'll shut up and you guys can take over. They've been doing the new Final Fantasy VII thing, which is so far removed from the original game to be like almost a completely new game just set in the same universe with the same characters, and it's gotten a lot of flack for that, but it's also gotten a lot of praise for not just being a straight up remake. Right, I'm done. You guys take over.
Yeah, well, I think one game that I was actually hoping we would get to discuss with one of the makers, Charles Cecil, is Broken Sword, Shadow of the Templars. Because they, obviously there's the original version from, when is that, from 1993, 94, something like that?
95.
Then there is a director's cut from I think the early 2010s, which not only attempted to visually remaster the game and add new portrait art, stuff like that, but also interjected new material. And now they're doing, from what I can tell, a more faithful remake of the original without the new director's cut material, but with more, visual remastering and sonic remastering done to it. So I think that's interesting, because here we actually have a game that has had both perspectives applied to it. The first time around, they tried expanding the story, and I never actually played through the director's cut version, but in my opinion, what little I saw of it throws off the pacing badly. For one, the game no longer starts off with the Paris in the Fall monologue. It starts off with Nicole, George Stobart's partner in crime, finding a dead body related to the main story of Broken Sword, but not present in the original game.
And it was shit too.
I think the idea is noble, but I think the reason that Revolution are trying to do it all over again, and they'll have to correct me one day, and hopefully they'll want to, Charles or someone else will want to be on the show, is that they realized that what they were doing didn't quite work. It was a good idea that wasn't executed properly, and I'm not sure you could execute that properly if you are to mess up the narrative to such an extent and jumble things around and wedge things in that, basically you wound up messing up one of the most iconic openings of any adventure game.
Well,
do you think it was a... Oh, sorry, Trolls, you go.
Well, I was just going to say counterpoint. There is a way to do that. The Seventh Guest VR remake / inspired by whatever has garnered almost universal praise. And it does take a bit of a detour as far as the source material goes. It's still the same characters, it's still the same overarching plot, but everything else has changed dramatically, and it's garnered almost nothing but praise for what it's done.
It looks really interesting. I'll give them that, and it does something else, which is, of course, I don't think you could do a proper Seventh Guest remake without the technical innovation in the forefront, because
the original was a powerhouse.
The Seventh Guest is a bunch of puzzles with a framing story, but focus as you play it is on the puzzles, not on the story, and of course focus being on the ghosts actually appearing in FMV form, which was something brand new, never really seen before to that extent. CD-ROM streaming CD audio quality music at certain points, and now the time is finally ripe for being able to do something equivalent to that, only with VR. You don't just have flat footage appearing in front of you as the ghosts. You can actually walk around them. You have real life footage superimposed on a 3D model, and it looks impressive as all hell.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's a sort of a the game is a bit of a victim of, going back to the idea of adding more plot. So it's those two things, isn't it? The idea of all new content, which you kind of need to slap on a box if you're going to resell something, and this obsession, which we have talked about before with other game developers, that just obsession with playing hours, as if the amount of time that you play a game equates to the worth of the price tag that's on the virtual box. We don't sell anything in a box anymore. But why that's so difficult with most adventure games is the fact that you have most of the time some kind of linear plot, and therefore if you try and insert anything, as Fred says, you mess around with the pacing. But one game that recently that has been able to do some of that kind of stuff is Hypnospace Outlaw, which has been able to introduce new content, because it's not really a linear game in the same way that a lot of narrative-driven games are. So you can add more characters and add more sort of depth to that world constantly without necessarily having to completely remake the game or remaster it.
Oh, that's a good point, because Hypnospace Outlaw is one of those outliers where the gameplay itself invites new content constantly being updated. It's not a traditional point and click. You're basically playing in a 90s web browser. That's the interface. So it's that lends itself to, we'll just add more web pages for people to go to. We'll make the lore deeper and deeper. Whereas if you wanted to do that with a traditional point-and-click adventure, the go-to strategy was always, okay, we've covered the first game, and now we're going to do the sequel, and the sequel, and the sequel, and the sequel, because we want to tell more of the story.
If you go back into our archive, we interviewed the dev that did Hypnospace, because we interviewed him about his game Dropsy. He's a genius. He thinks about these things in a completely different way to everybody else, and his games are fantastic. You should go out and play them.
He also gives great hugs and has amazing musical taste.
Yes, and scarves. Beautiful scarves. He always wears a scarf for some reason.
Oh, I thought you said scars.
Scars, yes. Oh,
beautiful scars.
He gets in bar fights regularly. It's beautiful scars all over his face. No, actually, he's a very good boy. But yeah, that's a good point. But you don't see him go back to Dropsy, for instance, and adding more and more content to that, because that was, for all intents and purposes, a linear point and click adventure game.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you could add some more side quests, I guess, if you really wanted to, but it didn't need it, I don't think. And also, that's a sort of like an older project. But again, I mean, that's also not necessarily fully a linear thing. You could add those kind of side questy kind of things into it, but it definitely doesn't fit Broken Sword or any of those kind of things. And I wonder whether it's not just the sort of the design of the games that affects this, but also, time has moved on. The way that we design games has moved on, and there's lots more playing around with narrative forms and those sorts of things. I'm just thinking about the kind of stuff that Grundislav has been putting out, and obviously the last Dave Gilbert one had sort of multiple endings and all this other kind of stuff. So maybe we're getting to a point where that kind of thing could be done if everybody needed a quick money grab.
I mean, it was done for a game like Mass Effect 3, which was extremely controversial upon release because everyone thought the ending was underwhelming. And I've never seen the original ending, but they actually went back and patched it and did an extension of it to make it a bit more narratively satisfying.
That sounds like a movie reshoot kind of thing. It's like, oh, this did not test well. We're going to go back and fix this shit.
Basically, yes. And, that's where the whole archiving thing and the problems surrounding that come in, because unless someone actually took time to archive a playable version of it, the original Mass Effect 3 with the original ending would be incredibly hard to get running today, I would imagine. There's probably all sorts of DRM, demanding that you update the game, or else as soon as you put in the disc.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. Like, this happens in movies all the time. Something tests bad, they go back, they reshoot the thing. A very famous example is the first Men in Black movie, which where the ending was completely reshot because it was originally just them standing around talking for 20 minutes, and it turned into an action thing. There was a whole third alien race that was in the plot that got taken out during editing. That original version never saw the light of day. This happens in movies all the time. And I would assume in games during the QA stages, or even the first beta testing, outside beta testing, early access, whatever you have, people, the devs keep going back and fixing stuff that doesn't test well. And I think if we expect people to archive all of those iterations of the game instead of what the devs consider the final project, at least at that time, then that's sort of a weird position. I know that's not what you're arguing, but that is sort of a weird position to take.
Yeah, but you're also wrong, trolls.
Yes, well, often, yes.
Well, you're wrong. That original version of Men in Black did come out, but then they wiped all of our memories.
Oh, fuck off.
Oh.
Good night.
Yeah, all right, that's enough out of you.
They did the same thing to Exorcist 2, only it didn't actually help. It didn't make a difference. Horrible film, incidentally. Never watch it, no matter how much you like, especially if you loved the first one. Never watch it. Skip to the third one.
I mean, not that this is a movie podcast or anything, but there's been scores of examples in movies where something was originally shot one way and then went into some sort of studio meddling situation, and then sometime after the fact, the director gets called back into the studio like 20 years later and said, okay, we'll now let you cut the version you always imagined. Blade Runner, of course, comes to mind. But then there are other films like Event Horizon, which originally had was even more fucked up than the original version. But the original, rolls of film that this thing was shot on burned in some warehouse somewhere, so we'll never see a director's cut of that. And I would imagine the same thing actually applies to the 11th Hour, where all the original material has been lost, all the 3D models, all the FMV stuff.
What a shame.
No, it's all gone. If someone wanted to remaster it for whatever purposes, they would be unable to. The closest we've gotten is the ScumVM guys who have gone in and fixed some of the shit in the code. added some, quality of life things, added subtitles and all that sort of stuff. They did the same with the Seventh Guest. But as far as actually remastering the video and all that sort of stuff, all we have is whatever AI upscaling can get. And we actually did a few tests with that, and it turned out
I mean, it's decent, and that's that's going over the broken sword again, because again, I would imagine that we would cover this on a subsequent episode in greater detail. But Revolution is in the same position for reasons unknown. Lots of the original broken swords assets in high res are apparently lost. So what they are doing is going to the stuff that went out into the game and upscaling it with some manual labor, but also with some AI. And I guess, AI is hugely controversial, but I think it's a real silver lining, honestly, that in spite of the ethical problems with this technology, we can actually remaster stuff that we couldn't remaster before, in terms of music, in terms of films. What the Beatles have been doing is just mind-blowing to me, and not something I expected to be able to see in my lifetime. And if we get something similar to that with games, Trolls is Yellow again, you may have to edit this, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, I have some major issues with AI and the way that it's trained, and also the sort of the resource hog that it is. But I think there is, if you can set all of that stuff aside, I think there's a massive difference between a company and a group of artists who have produced the stuff themselves, using it as a tool to help them transform it into something else, and they're still the ones in control of that process. Yeah. And people just using it to produce their own images and their own assets, and not paying the people who actually do that kind of stuff and making not just a substandard product, but also a morally dubious one.
Well, I really want to interject here, because I share your concerns about generative AI entirely. That whole thing is a mess. But as far as upscaling algorithms and all that sort of stuff, I'm as far as being a environmental resource hog, I completely get that. But upscaling is a different ballpark than generative AI. Also, I had a second point, but I sort of forgot about that one. Oh no, the Broken Sword, what they're doing with AI. We talked to Charles Cecil at Adventure X, and he was, first of all, he was very cautious about even telling us about the AI thing. So I don't even know if we're supposed to bring it up here.
Well, I don't think it's top secret, but he knew that it would stir controversy, and I think that he meets a lot of criticism from a lot of gamers concerning this, because they do not necessarily understand how Revolution are using it.
No, he told us very emphatically and explicitly that the algorithms they're using are trained exclusively on their own artwork. So it's not something that they're just pulling from, a dream or of whatever the fuck we've got out there. So yeah, that's the one thing. And I think if you can use it responsibly, then I other than the environmental concerns, which are no small concern, then yeah.
Yeah, and they're using manual labor for stuff that AI has a hard time with, so they're not actually AI upscaling hands of faces. They've got someone painting those over the originals in higher resolutions, but the bodies of sprites and backgrounds and whatnot, that's done with the assistance of AI upscale, but it all goes through a human in the end, as far as I understood it.
Oh yeah, and listen. This is not going to be the benefits and problems and controversy. Why the fuck controversies? What the fuck?
Yeah,
have you done
that's my fault. Sorry, the English versus US pronunciation. You've gone for the worst of both there.
Yeah, I think we got a cunt with a controversy here.
Oh God, yes. But anyway, this episode is not about AI. But I dimly recall the first time Scum VM came out, and it allowed you to slap this super eagle filter on top, and everyone was just like, "What the fuck is this? This looks awful." And AI upscaling sort of does the same thing if you leave it unchecked, which is thankfully not what the Revolution guys are doing. I have an idea. why don't we? Because we got 15 minutes left if we're going to stick to our 1 hour episode rule. So I just want to talk about the fan made remasters, remakes, and especially demakes, which I'm fascinated by. You take something that was state of the art at the time of release, and you intentionally make it not shittier, but you de-evolve it into a. I mean, there's this one dude spent I don't know how many was it 10 or 12 years
Wasn't
or whatever.
18 years or something.
18, yeah, that's right.
Absurd. Not 80 years. 18 years.
18, yeah. But he spent 18 years demaking King's Quest 6, which was arguably one of the most powerhouse fuck you games of its time. Like, it required an insane amount of computing power to run properly in the day. He demade that into Sierra's first engine, the AGI engine, the one that runs Space Quest 1, Police Quest 1, Leisure Suit Larry 1, all that shit. And it not just in a sort of fake, I did this in Adventure Game Studio and just downscaled all the graphics. No, he rebuilt it in the actual engine. It will run on a DOS machine, a period DOS machine.
He did also make a story change in the scene where you show the mirror to Death and makes him cry. You now show him the original system requirements of King's Quest 6. I'm making this up entirely. The story is 1-to-1 the same as far as I understand.
It would produce the same results.
I'm always fascinated by people that can go back to that think in a way that allows them to be able to demake stuff, because one of the things that I really love about adventure games now anyway is the fact that we're not just making the biggest thing that the latest computer hardware can deal with. We're making the things that we want to be made. I guess I'm saying we. I don't know why I'm saying we, but I guess as one of the backseat designers that tells everybody what they're supposed to be doing.
There you go.
But making the stuff that can be made, because we have almost, as far as adventure games are concerned, we have almost limitless power. So let's just do the point and click adventure that we've always wanted to have, or artificially putting constraints on things in order to make them more artistic. Like saying, okay, well, I'm only going to use 16 colors, or I'm only going to be able to use AGI from Sierra's old games, that sort of thing. I have a lot of respect for the people who are able to do it, because it's not easy to do. You don't just sort of, oh yeah, I'll just redo it in AGI and then it's done. It takes a lot of work to be able to work out what you can take away and still retain the essence of what the original thing was. It's very, very difficult to do, and it's very impressive.
Yeah, and it's sort of a great litmus test for just how good was the game. I mean, if you play King's Quest 6, of course, you had the technological advancements of the time. It was one of the big games to like show off to your friends, look what my computer can do, that type of stuff. But if you boil it down to its essence, which I think is what this dude has actually done in the 18 years it took him to produce this demake, what he's done is he's boiled it down to its absolute essentials and said, we'll strip away all the bells and whistles, and we'll just see what is actually left. Is it still a good game? And I've always wanted to do the same thing to Space Quest 6, and not just demake it in AGI. I want to go all the way back and like do a demake in a Commodore 64 kind of style. So it's like Roger's the sprite, and you walk him around, you have one action button, and see if that game still holds up.
Well, that would be an interesting one to do, because I think a lot of people's issues with Space Quest 6 are that it doesn't really feel like a Space Quest game in a lot of ways, partially because of the it's a one-off for that kind of, for the time, high-res VGA graphics, but also the writing isn't quite the two guys, because it's not. But it's not. It doesn't quite fit. At least that's what sort of the critics of that game would say. So there's probably something that you could do in the demake that would maybe bring back some of those qualities that maybe got lost through the production process of late 90s Sierra that sort of stripped a lot of that original stuff away, and you'd get something that's different, but maybe something that is more true to the spirit of at least what the fans believe the Space Quest series always was.
Oh shit, I lost you guys. Are you guys still there?
I'm there. I think.
We're here.
Oh, okay,
but I lost Gareth too, unless he just stopped speaking.
Maybe I stopped speaking at an inopportune time.
I don't know. Maybe it just sounded like he just caught off there. But I'll just edit that bit out. I completely agree. And another thing I'd love to do is like take the much maligned Mask of Eternity King's Quest and remake that into a point and click adventure game and see if the actual story still holds up. Because it's one of those things where some games are so tarnished by the reception they got at release and what went on during development. We all know Space Quest 6 came out sideways and screaming, and Mask of Eternity came out with his feet first and bathed in its own blood. And it's amazing that thing came out at all. So it would be interesting to see, okay, if we strip away all the negative baggage that these games have and try to reimagine them either by demaking them or remaking them in a completely different style and see if there was something there that actually merited some sort of goodness. Sorry, my vocabulary just ran out.
Hey, I may be misremembering, but I think someone at some point was working on a Curse of Monkey Island demake, and it probably floundered until it got cancelled quietly because the
mouse.
People who will work for 18 years on something like this, they're kind of rare, and we should treasure them with everything we have. Yes. But it would be great to see if some of the concerns with regards to Curse of Monkey Island could be put to rest, because I think it's a great game, but I'm biased. It's the first Monkey Island game I ever played, and it remains one of my favorite adventure games, but it's not quite the same as Monkey Island 1 and 2, and that's understatement of the year. It's very, very different. It looks different. It feels different. And it's an interesting thought exercise to try to bring it closer to what Ron Gilbert originally wanted, imagining that he doesn't spectacularly return to Monkey Island down the line.
I think that no pun intended, that ship sailed. I think Curse has anything to do with whatever he imagined. But yeah, that's an interesting thought experiment. Go back and like do a Monkey Island 3 that doesn't have anything to do with what we now know as Curse of Monkey Island. And interestingly, let's stay on Monkey Island for a bit, because there were 2 remasters. That's at least what they were called. And they were remasters of the first 2 games released, which were very maligned until some genius figured out, and this is where we get into the fan community again, some genius figured out how to strip all the assets from the original floppy versions and strip out all the voice acting and all the good stuff in the remasters and sort of splice them together in Scum VM. So you can now have the best of both worlds. You didn't have to put up with the shitty remaster graphics. You can play the old ones with them.
Those are fascinating, though. Let me preface this by saying that I didn't really have a problem with the remastered graphics. But I do think where they wind up being a bit clumsy is that, as far as I know, the new graphics actually run on top of the old code. So when you're playing Monkey Island 1 or 2 Special Edition, you're playing Monkey Island 1 and 2. That's the original Scum code from the late 80s, early 90s running underneath with a new sheen to it, with a new coat of paint slapped onto it,
yes.
Quite literally. And that's... It's interesting that you can do it. It's amazing that the code still exists and that you can port it to modern systems. If it were me, I probably would have done it differently, because there are very clearly limitations. Once you see modern Guybrush walking around, his walk cycle does not match his movement speed in the slightest. It just looks wrong. And I think that's where a lot of the grief comes from. They made a very obvious choice in the art style that a lot of people would dislike, but Monkey Island fans are assholes. Look at how they received the art style of Return to Monkey Island. You can fucking quote me on that. That was atrocious. If you were part of that dogpiling, shame on fucking you. Go find something else to do. It's an amazingly beautiful game.
Blood pressure, Fred. Blood pressure. Okay, here's Monkey Island 1 and 2 remasters are, for the reasons you just described, by definition, remasters, because, like you say, they run on top of the old code. Basically, what they did was new coat of paint. And you can say what you want about the walking animation. I gotta be honest, I've seen a lot of modern adventure games where the walking is sort of floaty. And I think that's
That's true.
when people build games in Unity, it always looks like they're sort of floating on top, especially when you use 3D models. I remember playing The Longest Journey back in the day, which has pre-rendered backgrounds and 3D models walking on top of it, and it always looks like they're sort of ghostly gliding over the top of it. And even the old LucasArts games back in the old Scum days, Day of the Tentacle and the first Monkey Island games, they actually do the same. But with the pixel art being what it is, it's harder to sort of detect that they're floating on top. If you notice, whenever characters in Scum games and old LucasArts games and Sierra games as well, when they walk up and down stairs, they don't actually walk up and down stairs. They just sort of float an inch above the stairs.
That's because they fall down and die.
Well, that's King's Quest 3 you're thinking of. The only game. Now, this is true. The only game where I sort of stopped in my tracks when I realized this, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. In Beneath the Steel Sky, Revolution's game, every time he walks up and down a flight of stairs, they have carefully hand animated it separately each time to make sure he steps on the actual steps going up and down.
That's true.
God damn.
George Stobart does it too, doesn't he?
Yes, they hand animated all that shit because they were and his turning animations in Broken Sword and his walking animation perfectly matches what his feet are doing on the ground. It's really hard art. Ben Chandler does it really well in like Shard Light and Unavowed and all the games he's worked on. He really works hard to make sure the movement speed and the feet touching the ground actually match. He is, however, sort of hampered by how Adventure Game Studio sometimes handles things, which is when you move diagonally, sometimes it doesn't switch to the diagonal position of the sprite, so they do this little floaty walk up and down the screen. Hey, he does his damn best.
I think my vote for a demake is I would like Quest for Infamy demaked into a bundle.
Actually, that's a good question. If we put this in the hands of fans, let's not wait around for Night Dive Studios or the studios themselves, if they still exist, to get around to actually doing either a remaster or a remake or whatever. What game would you like to see rebuilt or remastered? What games had like a gem hidden behind a mountain of shit that needs to come out? What games just would just benefit from a coat of paint, or what game is just impossible to run on modern machines? Yeah, go for it.
I think did we lose Trolls again?
No, I'm still here.
We lost everyone.
I'm not still here.
I'm speaking
he's still there.
to avoid.
I'm still here. You're just having a fit.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. No, that's a good doctor. Are you pulling my leg?
No, I'm still here.
No.
I don't
understand what's going on.
I thought I lost you guys.
Wouldn't have been the worst thing that's happened.
I can do this exercise because I thought of it earlier today, and I didn't get to bring up this game during our conversation, but we'll probably talk about it another time. Space Quest 1 VGA is pretty controversial with some fans and also with at least Scott Murphy. I'm not sure if Mike Crow has ever made any public remarks on it, but it changes the look and feel of the game considerably to make it into something else. Whether you like that something else is entirely on you, but it's different.
Not up to you, it's on you.
Yeah, well, I would like to see a faithful Space Quest 1 VGA or otherwise remake. I would like to see a high-res equivalent of the world that Scott and Mark designed in the late 80s, rather than the Forbidden Planet colorized 1950s sci-fi thing that eventually went out there from Sierra.
Yeah. Oh, interestingly, when I was in Tacoma at the fanfare and I had tacos with Mark Crow, I actually did briefly bring up Space Quest 1 VGA and asked him if he was just as upset about it as Scott. And he sort of very diplomatically said, yeah, I wouldn't have done it that way. so neither of the two guys are particularly fond of that one. That's an interesting one.
It's a very good backhanded compliment.
Yeah, I mean it is. I mean they did do. I mean Turbo Chimp did Space Quest 3 in a sort of modern Unity 3D kind of thing, which me and Jon Paul did the music for, so I'm slightly biased. But I think that one worked quite well, even though Roger has grown anime hair. He kind of looks like Sonny Bonds from the anime version of Police Quest 2.
I've actually yet to play that, but you know, I'm thinking more in alternate history lines. You know, if Scott Murphy and Mark Crow were actually allowed to sit down and revisit Space Quest 1, how would they have done that? I think that would have been really interesting.
I mean, that's also an interesting little side note. I promise, Gareth, you'll get to do your bit in a minute. But during that same taco dinner with Mark, he would not have remade Space Quest 1 at all, because Chris Pope was also at the table, and he told me about how Mark used to have like old artwork, drawings, sketches, and shit from the Space Quest games, and he just tossed them. He's like, "Fuck it, I don't need this shit." So he doesn't keep archives. He's not nostalgic for old shit. Once he's done with something, it's on to the next thing. The only reason why we still have artwork from the Space Quest games is because some of the other artists held on to their artwork and sort of smuggled it home. But Mark is not like that. He wouldn't have remade Space Quest 1 at all.
I think the Sierra game that has aged the worst is nothing to do with the tech. It's to do with the way that the story is told and the way that it's written, and it is the Police Quest series.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder whether there is scope for somebody to not necessarily use modern technology to redo some of the elements of those games, but I wonder whether there's something to be said about reshooting them effectively to bring in some of maybe the more hopefully more nuanced view of the police that we have in our modern world. And when I think about sort of police procedurals still exist, and there's still plenty of stuff that paints the police as the good guys and has them saving the day and all that kind of stuff. I'm not against that kind of thing. But I think even those have had to acknowledge the fact that not everybody in the police force is a shining light, and that there are major problems with an idea of the good guys versus the bad guys. And I wonder whether a redone Police Quest that takes into account the fact that we are now in a world that has had The Wire and The Shield and even Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and can maybe add some of those plot elements, it would be a complete departure, and it hasn't been the stuff that we've been discussing today because we've been talking more about tech. But I'd be very, very interested to see what a Police Quest in 2024 looks like versus one from the late 80s.
That is a really, really good one. I recall... first of all, the whole, cops not being a shining light in Police Quest 2, there's one dude who shows up completely baked, and you look through his records, and he has been caught, smoking dope on the job. And you walk into his office, he's still there. He's just like, it's on his record, but he's still there. He's just sitting around. He's still baked, by the way. So that's the extent of, shenanigans going on in the precinct in the original Police Quest games. But I really do like the idea. We should bring that up as another topic for another show, actually, if we were to narratively re-examine a game. I think that's a really, really good one.
Well, I think even Leisure Suit Larry has aged better than Police Quest, because Leisure Suit Larry, the joke was always the fact that he was an idiot and his attitude towards women was ridiculous. And it was ridiculous even then. It's even more ridiculous now. And there is still... I mean, there's parts of it that really don't age well at all, but I think the general premise of it needs some work on it, but can kind of hold up. But Police Quest, it's so painful now.
You could argue that some of the Police Quests even missed the mark at the time when Police Quest 4 came out. That was against the backdrop of the LA riots and everything going on in the early 90s. And Daryl F. Gates perhaps wanted to comment on it, just not in the most prudent way, let me put it that way.
No, because he more or less cost the fucking thing. But yeah, that would really be interesting. Do you guys remember back in the day after we finished Stair Quest and we were talking about what sort of game we would like to do next, and it never came to anything? We did have this idea of the reverse police quest called Bad Cop, which was basically about an alcoholic cop who took down a drug gang, but not because he wanted to be the good guy, because he wanted to be the leader of the drug gang.
My main contribution was suggesting that we do it with anthropomorphic animals, like cartoon animals. And I have the fondest memories of reading messages, between us about that in the Slack channel that No More For Today Games had at the time, while out grocery shopping, and just nearly pissing myself laughing and trying to hold it in. And I kept trying to get the woman I was dating at the time interested. It didn't last. Maybe because she thought it was an awful idea.
Honestly, it kind of was, but it was so awful. It was funny. Like, what animal are we going to make the coroner? Like, what the fuck?
Well, I think we've got plenty of material there for a future podcast. But even if you just want the technical answer, let's say Police Quest anyway, I think it'd be really interesting to see a sort of in the style that sort of Infamous Quests have done, that sort of Space Quest 4 kind of interface and graphics, but the original Police Quest game, that'd be kind of cool, I think.
Yeah, well, they did do a VGA remake, but again, that was sort of just new coat of paints kind of thing. Very interesting. Let's save that for another show, because I think the idea of narratively examining a game, and perhaps a maligned game, and try to see if there was something cool underneath it. Let's do that. My pick by the way, someone's going to bring up Precinct, like the Jim Walls Kickstarter that went nowhere. Yeah, we know Jim Walls was trying to revive the Police Quest series, and unfortunately that failed. And there's another game out now called Precinct that has nothing to do with the Jim Walls thing. So yes, we are aware. You don't need to bring that up in the comments. Thank you. My pick for this is actually, it's sort of a halfway between, I would just like to see this with new tech, and also I would like the story to come out even better than it did. I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream is one of those deeply flawed games that has a really, really good story in it. And perhaps even some of the puzzles are really good. I mean, obviously, Harlan Ellison's original story, he then fleshed out and turned it into this adventure game. Some of the shit in it hasn't aged well, probably because Harlan didn't age well even during his lifetime. But the actual tech around it, it's built on the same engine that ran Inherit the Earth, as in the fairy-tastic masterpiece of adventure games, which is actually kind of a good game, if you don't mind my saying. But the engine is just not suited for the grim, dark, oppressive kind of story they want to tell. And I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream. The artwork looks terrible. The music is even worse. Characters moonwalk all over the place because the engine doesn't know what the fuck to do with boundaries and shit like that. And it just ends up looking like a laughingstock. I would really like to see someone actually get in there and make it in the same sort of what's that sci-fi horror adventure game, starts with an S. They had a couple of them. Space Station, Everything Goes to Shit, Bloody. Okay, I just described every sci-fi horror game of all time. God, it'll come back to me.
This is what the YouTube comments are for.
Yes. System Shock, right?
Not System Shock.
Dead Space.
Not Dead Space. No. A genuine point-and-click adventure game. My browser just crashed. Come on, the fuck. Different browser.
That's a horror story.
Yeah, that is a horror story. What the fuck is it? I'm going to edit this bit out. Don't worry, but I really want to find out what this game is called. Sci-fi horror. Come on, Stasis. That's the one.
Oh, right.
Stasis. Yeah, do it in the same style as Stasis, which, if you haven't played it, is just that atmosphere is unbeatable. Yeah, do it like that. Like just make it good, because the story kind of deserves it, I feel. That's my pick.
All right.
Who wants to round this one out? Do we have a website yet? Just kidding.
Well, we used to have a website.
We don't anymore.
Yeah.
Well, you can find us at Trolls' YouTube channel, which you're probably already listening to this too. So,
Because we don't have an RSS feed yet.
We're working on the website thing, but it does seem like we have a bit of a Facebook presence still, at any rate enough for us to actually put off deleting our open group. So
yeah, we were going to toss it, but someone actually commented in there, and that's enough. One comment was enough for us to just fucking keep it.
We are so desperate.
People are so damn nice, and you can look that up on Facebook. It's just called Backseat Designers. You can also find us on Trolls' Space Quest Historian Discord server, where we have a Backseat Designers channel, and we're not terribly good at soliciting input from these places. We weren't even in the show's heyday, but toss us a line and we'll snort it. I mean, see what happens.
Very good.
Damn, that
I
was
make a cocaine joke, and you guys lose the connection.
My laugh just went into like my voice just broke laughing so hard. Yes, you are a funny man, sir. I shall endeavor to make your next introduction non-insulting. I almost said insultory.
There's nothing insulting about wanting to kiss Peter Cushing.
No, but that was the rewrite. You should have seen the first one. I'm just kidding. Yeah, whatever, all that stuff. And if you want to get in on the Discord, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening on YouTube, you probably should be watching it because it's just a static background with 3 people talking over it. But if you are perusing this on YouTube, there's an invite link to the SQS Discord in the description. So cheers, everyone. Thank you so much. This was fun. Let's do this again.
Yeah, see you on the Chrono stream.
Hey, that's my line, asshole. Say goodbye, Frederick.
Bye.
Say goodbye, Gareth.
Tack for a day.
Okay, thank you. This is how we used to do it in the old days, so let's just pretend that's the tagline. And it's a goodbye from me. Good night.
No, dead lecket.